Hi, this is Andrew Aversa with Impact Soundworks, and in this video, I'm going to show you the incredible articulation mapping capabilities of Tokyo Scoring Strings 2.0. Of course, with Essentials, you don't have all of the articulations, but the functions and your ability to create whatever mapping and triggering setup you want are exactly the same. This video is going to assume that you already have a general understanding of what TSS 2.0 is, so I'm going to jump right to the articulation tabs here. Now, in my main walkthrough video, I already showed what most of these articulations sound like. So now let's figure out how do we trigger them and how do we change that to suit our own workflow. Well, first, at a glance, you can see exactly how each articulation is set up by looking at the text in the bottom right-ish area. KS means key switch, L means latching, which I'll explain in a minute, and C-2 is the key switch note that you have to press. If you look on the contact keyboard down here, these are the key switches. This is the very bottom of the keyboard. You can see the little -2 for C-2. And by the way, if you can't see this keyboard, you go to the view menu and make sure keyboard is toggled. You can activate a key switch by pressing it on a MIDI keyboard like this. You can also click on it in the UI, like this. And then you can also write a note for it in the piano roll or sequencer of your DAW. Here I'm on Arcos, which is our basic sustain. That's our regular mezzo forte sustain. If we select B-2 here, we get tremolo. You'll notice that we're actually getting legato transitions on this articulation as well. You can disable that by clicking on this legato icon here. So with legato disabled, I now get multiple notes instead of legato transitions. And as a quick refresher, by default, the Modwheel controls dynamics of these articulations. But we don't just use key switches in our default mapping. If we look at the legatos tab, then we can see velocity is used too. That's this VEL text, and then 80 to 127 is what velocity will actually trigger this articulation. Now, because these are legatos, we're talking about the velocity of the second note in the legato phrase. So for example, I'm going to play a C, and then I'm going to play a G. We're talking about the velocity of the G. In the default mapping, higher velocities will trigger legato bow, and then lower velocities trigger slurred legato, and then the lowest ones will trigger portamento. And you can see this mapping here. Portamento is 1 to 19, legato slur 20 to 79, and legato bow 80 to 127. Bow and slur are on F sharp -1. If I select F sharp -1, we can see that is assigned to lyrical legato. Which is a little bit more glidey, more emotional, and more syrupy. But this one also starts at velocity 20 because we still have portamento from 1 to 19. You can also switch the portamento articulation by looking at these key switches, A-1 and A sharp 1. So if you want an even more slurred portamento, we would select A sharp -1. The same goes for any combination of legato and portamento. We could switch to the run legato, and then we could use portamento bow with that, or slur with that, or we could use slur with legato bow and slur, any combination you want. Let's say though that these velocity ranges don't quite work for you. Maybe your keyboard is very sensitive. So what you could do is click on the articulation you want to edit, in this case, legato bow. I'll click on the map tab, and now here I can set the velocity range to whatever I want. So maybe here I want to make legato bow only on 100 to 127. And then I'll go to legato slur and I'll make that 20 to 99. Or let's say we want something even more emphasized than legato bow. We can take marcato legato, which is the most emphasized. This is new in TSS 2.0. Let's select, instead of G sharp -1, F -1. So now 3 articulations are on the same key switch. And we're going to set marcato to the very highest velocities. Let's do 110 to 127. And then bow could be something like 80 to 109, and slur could be 20 to 79. And so now we have this gradient where the lowest velocities are going to be the most sort of blurry and glidey. But then if I play at higher velocities, we get the higher bow emphasis of the marcato legato articulation. So changing velocity rules and key switch rules really is as simple as that. And just to circle back to the idea of latch, what is latch or latching? So when a key switch has latch enabled, that means you just have to tap it either on the virtual keyboard or on a physical controller, and it will stay on that articulation. If we turn off latch, so these are now all latch off, and I can do the same here. So now, if we want legato, we actually have to hold F#-1. Otherwise, we get no legato at all. I'll go ahead and hold F#-1 now, and now we get our legato articulations again. Moving on to shorts, I want to show you how to set up something that is very commonly requested, and that is putting different short lengths on the Modwheel, which is a MIDI CC. By default, the shorts are their own key switches. So F-2 gives us staccato, and then G-2 gives us spiccato. If we do D#-2, we get these long decrescendos. But maybe we don't want to have to use 6 different key switches or 8 different key switches to switch between our shorts. Let's start by putting all the shorts we want on the same exact key switch. And because I have a 61 key controller, maybe I want that key switch to be a lot higher up on the keyboard. So I'm going to select staccato, and then I'm going to change the key switch all the way up to C2, which is now all the way up here on the keyboard. I'll do the same thing for the other short articulations. Okay, so I've now mapped 6 short articulations to the same key switch, which is C2. But you'll notice that they have this exclamation point. The system has no way of knowing what I want when I press C2. So let's go ahead and start adding a new rule to each one. We'll add MIDI CC instead of velocity. And here's the CC number we want to use, which 1 is the Modwheel by default. And I want to set it up so that the shortest articulation is lowest on the CC. Spiccato secco, I would say, is the shortest and tightest, so I'm going to set this to maybe 0 to 24. And then spiccato, I'll set to 25 to 50, and I'm going to keep going like this. I now have 6 short articulations on Modwheel, and I want you to watch down here. I'm going to drag the Modwheel up and down, and you're going to hear exactly what happens. We're on spiccato secco, spiccato, staccatissimo, staccato, sforzando short, and sforzando long. And just to show that on the main interface, you can see it here as well. Now, does this also move the dynamics knob? It does, but this dynamics knob actually doesn't affect the shorts dynamics because it doesn't really make sense to fade from one dynamic to another in the middle of a staccato note. So the dynamics, the volume of short notes, are determined by how hard you press the key. And by the way, you can change that behavior if you click on the sound tab. Now we can select, for example, what dynamic level triggers at what velocity for staccato. Here, these are split evenly, but let's say we wanted to make it so you have to press the key really hard to get that top dynamic. We can draw the table more like this. I'm not the best keyboard artist, you'll have to excuse me. Now we've made it so that if you play lightly, you're gonna get the bottom 1 or 2 dynamics until you press it quite hard. After we've done this setup, if you wanted to do this for the entire string orchestra, you would do this for each patch. And then you can save it as a snapshot. You could set it as something like short CC control, and then you could always load this anytime you load up this patch, or you could save this as a new NKI. However, we generally would suggest doing it as a snapshot because if you save it as a new NKI, if we edit that patch, then those changes wouldn't be applied to your custom NKI. So doing it as a snapshot, I think makes the most sense. That way, when you load a new project, you would just load the short CC control. And just to show what I mean, I've loaded the patch again. So I've cleared all of the custom settings I just did. I'm going to click on the snapshot icon, short CC control, and now it has loaded all of my work in just one click. Now, there are a few other things that you might want to know about the articulation mapping system. You actually have 3 rules to work with, and there are even some other ones that don't have anything to do with key switches, velocities, or MIDI CC, which you can see here. For example, there's pitch wheel, there's key range, for example, what key range on the keyboard triggers what articulation, not key switch, but for example, what playable range. And then there's sustain pedal, we can say down or up to trigger that articulation. So let's say I want to do a pedal condition for our legatos. I can go here and select sustain pedal, and then do the same thing for both bow and slur. Now, if I play a chord, but now with pedal down, which you can't see, but I am holding it down, we get legato as intended. Anyway, this is really just scratching the surface of what you can do with the articulation mapping system in Tokyo Scoring Strings 2.0. If there's any mapping or trigger system that you want to use, you can do it with this system. It is just incredibly powerful, and as you can see here, it's pretty easy to use as well. All right, this has been Andrew Aversa, and I will see you in the next one.